Hey kids, it was getting cold and snowy here, and like every year, I got snowmobile fever. So I went out and bought myself a little toy, little 600 Ski-Doo Renegade 2-stroke engine. It's in pretty good shape. I see a little blemish in the decal right there. It's got scratchers on it. I don't like that kind. I'll have to tie them down somehow. I find they just flop out while you're driving. It came with a link storage bag and little storage area on the back. One thing I noticed, there was quite a bit of oil here where the chain case pan is, and I started wiping it up, and then I thought, well, since it's a used sled and I don't know when it was changed last, the guy told me it was last year and he hadn't driven it last year because of an injury he got. So I think I'm gonna just take that apart and change it because that oil's really cheap to buy. And while we're doing that, we'll talk about the clutches and this chain case. I don't know if it'll fire up or not. It's been sitting in the garage now for a few weeks. It's got a choke on it. Pull that choke. Pretty quiet, really, for a two-stroke. And they don't smoke as much as they used to. It's been on it for 4,000 miles. Smoke coming out of it now. So we'll see if this leaks. It also came with a wire for the heated visor, which is good. I think it's going to work fine. The last sled that I owned was a 4-stroke, but these are just so cheap. This is a 2017. The guy had it for his wife, and it has the old Rev XP chassis, which isn't good for my back, but I probably only drive it 5 times this winter. And if I want to get back in the sport, then I'll get my buddy Clarence to find me a good 4-stroke, good used 4-stroke for a reasonable price in next year. Okay, we're on the right hand side of the sled here. This is where my oil problem was. And open that side up. So The oil might just have been that these bolts weren't tight enough. I doubt that. I think it's more of, it's a ridiculous way that you have to drain these things. You have to take all these bolts off. When you loosen it up, the oil starts draining out of it. So we probably just didn't get it wiped up. So to get at this thing, we'll have to take off the battery and probably the battery stand and this part of the muffler. We'll have a look at the chain and see if it needs to be tensioned, and we will put it back together and fill it up with oil. Let's jump over onto the other side of the sled and we'll take a look at the belt and the clutches real quick. All right, we're on the left side of the sled now. I just want to have a look at the belt. Take that panel right off. So we have a spare belt, which is good. We're over here on the left side of the sled now, and this is your transmission. It's called a CVT, or a continuously variable transmission. This setup has been around for many years. They continuously improve it. They're a lot easier to make changes to now than what they used to be in the past. There's a number of components to it. So inside the engine, there's a crankshaft, and it's connected to this primary clutch. This is also called the drive clutch. And then you have the belt that connects the primary, and they call this the secondary, or the driven clutch. And then you have a jack shaft that runs through the sled onto the other side. This jack shaft runs through the sled over to the chain case, and we'll jump over there after we get this belt looked at. These belts have gotten a lot stronger over the years as well. I remember when Dad had our land, we used to blow belts every so often, and now I think they have Kevlar in them. And there are high horsepower sleds out there that I'm sure are blowing belts, but for the last trail sled I had, I can't remember if I had it for 5 or 7 years, and I never blew one belt in that whole time. Each of these clutches has a movable sheath and one static sheath. So on the primary, this outer one moves, and on the secondary, the inside one moves. On this primary clutch, inside there's little weights that fly out. They run on rollers, and as the RPMs come up, they start moving out from centrifugal force, and depending on how many RPMs the engine has, it will push harder or not so hard, and then it will move this belt up here, which causes the belt to tighten up, and it moves down on this pulley, and that gives you, from the time it grabs the belt to top speed on the sled, it gives you an infinite number of gears, and it's just such a smooth transition from 0 to top speed. On this clutch cover, it has a tool pouch, and inside this tool pouch should be a little tool that we need to adjust the belt and get the belt off so we can inspect it. Spark plug wrench. And there we are. So there's a little hole right here, and as you screw this in, it will start opening these sheaves up, and that belt will fall down, and we'll be able to get it out of there, hopefully. You can see that. I don't know if you can see that belt starting to fall in there now. And with these belts, you just kind of look them over to see if there's any uneven wear on them. Once this one looks good, check for cracking, or there's little cords in here that sometimes if it starts to wear, you can see the cords coming through the side. Well, that belt looks pretty good to me. On this sled here, there is a rotation for the belt, so we'll keep that going forward. Put it back on. Then start bringing this out, and that will let these sheaves go back together. So to adjust it, you can loosen this little bolt right here, and you can twist this. There's a tool here that goes on here. You can twist that to bring the belt up, or twist it counterclockwise, and it'll let the belt go down. And for this particular belt here, you want the top of that belt to be flush with these pulleys, which is pretty close to what we have there right now. So I'll just leave that like that. So this secondary is connected to a jack shaft, and the jack shaft runs through the sled, and we'll jump back over to the other side of the sled and we'll look at the chain case. All right, we're back over on the right hand side of the machine. This is where the chain case is that we need to get to. I'm just looking it over, trying to come up with a plan. We need to get this part of the exhaust off. It looks like it has a spring here, 2 at the top and 1 down there. And then we'll have to take the battery off, and probably the battery box. So we'll start out, see if we can get some of these springs off. What's the best way to get those off? They're going to be fun to get off. There's one. Should be fun to get back on. I got that lower one. There's one more right here. I don't even know how I'm going to get at that one. There we go. Whew. That has some mass to it. That'd be worth $1,000 to replace, I'm sure. Well, there's where you fill it, right there. There was one of the springs we got out. That's a tensioner. So I'll get probably a 10 mil and we'll unhook the ground wire. And then it looks like we need to take this piece off here. And maybe these 2 bolts here. And then we'll be able to get the battery out. Let's unhook this ground. That's scary. That was on finger tight. There those nuts go up underneath and you have to hold them in and screw everything in. And then we'll go with the positive. There's a signal wire in behind positive terminal, so we got to remember that. Boy, they're not in there very good. Alrighty, I got we take these off. That battery out so we can have a better look here. Another 10 mil over here. Make sure I get this on video here. There's another ground connected to this box at the very back. So this back one had bolt washer through the battery box, and then that ground, and then another little washer, and then the nut. I'm gonna put that right on that wire so I know that's where that one goes. Oh, there's the battery box. And now we should be able to get at all these. There's a little hole below this chain case, and when you start undoing those bolts, the oil's going to start coming out the bottom. There's one really low here. And I can't, oh, I might be able to get it. The oil's starting to pour out of her now. There seems to be oil right here underneath that battery. I don't know how it would ever have made its way there. Got some flexibility here. Now that should come off. We have a sensor here. Unplug. Watch out a little bit here. Little sensor that I unplugged right here. And that should come right off now. Like so. Clean that up a little bit. So that all looks good. That is way too loose. So we will tighten that up. So we're going to have to back that off. And turn it in and tighten it back up. Other than that, the sprockets look really good. The chain looks good. So I will get a wrench to loosen that off. There's supposed to be an O-ring there that you're supposed to pull back. Pull that back. And then you're supposed to turn this in by hand, and that's it. When you can't turn it anymore by hand, you're good. And that looks a lot better. So then we pull this. Then we pull this O-ring back up. And tighten this bolt, tighten this, and then we tighten this nut back up. want anything too tight here because you're just dealing with aluminum. And we all know how soft that is. At least it's not plastic. It's the next day here, and I came out and I gave this another wipe down here on the hand, and I found two. You're not gonna be able to see that probably, but that looks like solder on a wire. Piece of wire with solder on it, and I'm not sure what this is. It almost looks like a piece, something was crimped. So I wish I had looked at that closer last night. It was laying right there. I don't know where it would have come out of. I looked all over here at all these wires, and I couldn't find anything. Right here is the plug that you're supposed to check the level. It's supposed to be magnetic, and you're supposed to be able to take this out and see if there's any shavings, metal shavings on it. The guy it's a square head on it, and the guy had it rounded over. Remember, with square nuts, you have to get on it with a 12-point socket or a wrench. I couldn't get a wrench in there, so I pounded this on. There's one little piece in there that I can feel, but it says right in the manual not to worry about anything small. Almost like it's expected. I'm just gonna put a screwdriver under here and take that fill cap off while we have it all done here, as we have it all taken apart. I remember when we were younger, we always we lived in the city, but my grandparents had land my grandparents had land in the country, and my uncle had one of those trailers that go on the back of a half ton, and he had it on a couple of wooden sawhorses. And it had snowed that year, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet. So there was a slope down from the top of the snow down underneath the trailer almost to the grass. And he had a snow jet, and my sister was driving it, and she went by the trailer and slipped down the slope, and it was a brand new sled. She drove a piece of 2x4 right through the cab of that brand new sled of my uncle's. What is going on here? I'm missing a bolt right there. We used to go up to my grandparents every weekend with Dad's sister's family. So we kind of grew up like siblings instead of cousins. All right, I looked up the torque and it's saying 89 foot-pounds. Plug this little piece in. It's done. Now we will fill it with oil. I'll grab a funnel. All right, we have the good stuff, XPS Chaincase oil. It takes 12 fluid ounces, and I put the plug back in. I was gonna leave it off because when it starts running out that plug hole, you know you have enough. But the sled's up on dollies, so it's not perfectly level, and I figure it calls for 12 ounces, and we had it all apart, so it doesn't have any in it, so it'll take the whole thing. Put this cover back on. Next up is the battery box. We had a bolt, a washer went through, and then we had a tiny little washer and a nut. Positive up. I don't know if that was supposed to be that harsh, but bolts down here somewhere. Looks like we had this red signal wire. That goes in there like that. I need to put this little nut up through the bottom. Hold that in there with one finger. That went better than expected. Now, the dreaded exhaust. There's one spring there, and I see another one down in there. I don't know how it's possible, but I have misplaced one of those springs. I've probably spent an hour looking for it today, and I just cannot find it. So that's a little bit worrisome that I went back and I looked at the video and I pulled one off the top here, and I can't see that I reached in and grabbed it, so it must have just been hanging. And then when I took this off, I turned around and set it on the floor. Now, I'm thinking that I might have kicked the spring walking back and forth here, but I've looked under everything and I just cannot find it. I'm going to button this up. I'm kind of worried that that's fallen in somewhere. That's going to hit a moving part and cause me some grief, but I'll go to Ski-Doo there the first of the week and get a new spring, and I'll throw that on. Well, I lucked out on that one. There's one. That was kind of easy. There's two. And this one here is going to be an easy one. So I don't know why they were so hard for me to get off. I just must have been out of practice. This one here should be a joke. There we go. One of the things I forgot to talk about was when we were on the other side of the sled, that jack shaft came across here, and then that chain brought it down to a sprocket down here on the drive shaft. And we'll go underneath the sled here. There's the drive shaft there, and it's hooked to these cogs, and that's what drives your sled right there. And there's another one right over there. So the way these panels work is you put the top one in and you pull it up, and then the bottom one goes in and you slide it down. There's a couple little things to tighten it on, just like that. Now we'll move to the other side of the sled. I got a little pin over here we'll put in. That looks good. And we put the panel on. My light's going to be in the way. So the same thing. The top in. Slide it up. Bottom goes in, slide it down. It's that simple. That up, that up. The only other thing I wanted to talk about was I poured the fluid that we drained out of the Chaincase into this measuring cup, and it is just at 8 and it's supposed to be at 12. So hopefully he didn't have those bolts torqued up and it was just leaking a little bit of fluid. I'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully that one's all set. That ends this little job. Other than misplacing that spring, I'll keep an eye out for that, and I'll go to Ski-Doo this week and get a new one. But I want to thank you for hanging out in the garage, and stay tuned for the next one. Later.